But now your specialization is following the money, as you were talking about there. What have you really found, especially when it comes to Antifa most recently? How have you found that money has been really kind of driving some of those principles and then some of the activities that have been going on?
Yeah, well, money makes the entire protest industrial complex go round, the what we call Riot Inc. And it's not just the foot soldiers, and of course they need money, but they have all kinds of, like Andy No said, it is extremely organized, and there are all kinds of what they call mutual aid and mutual assistance networks. Those are people who provide shelter and food and supplies to Antifa. But also one of the things that they need is actual cash. And that comes via these platforms. We found several hard left, radical left wing funding platforms. They work kind of like GoFundMe, but we followed the money even further than that. So Antifa, Rose City, or the John Brown Gun Club of Elm Fork, or the Socialist Rifle Association of Portland and of Chicago. These are not incorporated entities. They are decentralized in that sense. They don't have LLCs, but they've got pages on these GoFundMe style platforms. We follow the money beyond that who builds these platforms. And we actually found it's the same people who are funding the other aspects of Riot Inc. Soros, Tide Center, the Arabella Funding Network, and so many others like it that are pouring money into every stage of the protest industrial complex, including to the bail funds. So that's one of the more smoking guns, is like, why would you be trying to get people who just assaulted law enforcement officers or set fire to cars and buildings out of jail as soon as possible? And it's because obviously they want them back on the streets for night two. And that's what's happening in these cities, is they're getting bailed out. So you can say, if you're like a Tides network or a Soros network or an Arabella network, you can kind of claim that, hey, we didn't know that there would be violence going on when we funded all of these organizations who organized the protests, provided the water bottles and all, and provided the supplies. We didn't know that violence was going to be occurring that night. And I guess, they would have a case to be made that they could say they didn't know. But once the people have been arrested for committing violence, funding the bailout projects that get them out of the jail and back on the streets quickly, you can't really feign ignorance to the fact that you're enabling chaos and unrest and violence.
Are we seeing, obviously you've talked a lot about, the domestic kind of connections with the funding and with the providing, like you said, material support to these organizations and these, and I love the term Riot Inc. I mean, that's very descriptive. But, have we seen in your research, because you're an incredible researcher, that's what you do, and have worked with some of the best people in this country doing that. Have you found traces of any kind of foreign influence? We talk about how Antifa's been named a domestic terrorist organization, but in order to really do something, we need it to be named a foreign terrorist organization. Do we have those links? Are they there?
Oh, absolutely. Big time. One of the names that I brought up at the White House and President Trump was very interested to learn more about was Neville Roy Singham. This guy is based in China. Peter Schweizer broke huge stories on Neville Roy Singham, really put him on the map. Most people had never heard of him. He was on the cover of Schweizer's last book titled BloodMoney. And Neville Roy Singham has been funding the pro-Hamas demonstrations in New York City. He funds the anti-ICE riots, or the groups behind them out in LA especially. And he's based in China and is a Marxist. He's very anti-American, and yet somehow he's allowed to interfere in our political process. And he's got this thing in New York called the People's Forum that sloshes a bunch of cash around. He also is married to Jody Evans, who's the head of Code Pink, another one of these radical groups. They were most recently in the news for basically, not physically assaulting the president's posse when they were trying to have dinner recently. They were shouting at him, getting up in their faces. They had to be dragged out. So that's Code Pink. Neville Roy Singham, I know for a fact the feds are all over him right now. I mean, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna and House Oversight Chairman James Comer just recently sent a letter to Treasury saying that they recommend freezing and seizing Neville Roy Singham's assets for funding chaos and unrest and acting as a unregistered foreign agent for China. I believe Judge Jeanine Pirro, U.S. Attorney Pirro, is looking at the Foreign Agents Registration Act as it relates to Neville Roy Singham's activities. So that's one. Another guy I brought up at the White House was this Swiss billionaire, Hansjörg Wyss, W-Y-S-S. Hansjörg Wyss is been funding the Arabella outfits to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, as they then turn around and use that money to fund Riot Inc. He's funded all kinds of other terrible things in this country. He's been investigated for his political giving because he has a clever way of funneling dark money into 501c4s that then help political candidates get elected. And we shouldn't be having foreign funding affecting our political process. I think everybody agrees with that.